All right, let's get into a little Packers talk, man. You had mentioned the other night about some fantasy talk, Jacob. And we're not talking about the Office fantasy talk either. We're talking about we're talking about fantasy football a little bit. We're going to spend just a few minutes on this. And listen, I understand there's a lot of people that don't play fantasy. I personally don't play fantasy football.
That shocks me that you don't. To be honest, it really does.
But I think it is cool. I get asked that all the time. Hey man, you want to join our league? I'm like, it's not for me. But I think it's cool to kind of see how that realm kind of coincides with the X's and O's, the football aspect that I really dive into. And sometimes I think you can gain a lot of really valuable knowledge from that type of stuff. But anyway, go ahead, man. What did you have? Did anything come to mind in terms of, the upcoming fantasy football season?
Yeah, and I mean, fantasy football to me, if you guys are OGs, me and that's actually how I got kind of my start with the podcast. We actually had a fantasy football podcast for a year. It was me, Tony, Paul, and Justin, which Justin still works with the podcast in certain ways. He gives Clayton a lot of good graphics here and there, and
Justin was awesome. I love Justin.
Very, very appreciative of that. So anyways, so fantasy football, and if you haven't played fantasy football, like Clayton said, it's a great way to enjoy the game a little more. I say, like, it makes watching, as a Packer fan, I absolutely am dialed in to you guys know, every single game, means a little bit more when you got a little money on the edge, or if you got something, just bragging rights over your buddy. So I enjoy it so much that if you guys have not indulged with it, reach out to Clayton or myself, and I'll kind of put you in the right direction. I believe Carly is going to do another fantasy football league this year. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think she enjoyed it last year. So
she did a great job with that too, man. That was awesome. Yeah, that was fun to kind of watch from the sidelines.
Yeah, dude, Blake B was there. He said the old fantasy podcasts were fun with Jacob and that one Vikings fan that's getting after it. That's bad luck, Paul. Paul was our resident Viking fan that we pooped all over. It was great. So anyways, let's get into it. The fantasy football tiers this year are a little bit interesting, especially if you're a Packers fan. And when you're in the fantasy football realm, if you're like me, you kind of get homer mentality and you want to draft your guys kind of thing. It makes, like I said, watching the games a little bit more enjoyable. The funny thing, though, about the Packers, especially for the last, number of years, is that they have no standout guy. The one thing I took away from this exercise here was that other than Josh Jacobs, which we'll just dive right into it, Josh Jacobs was our highest ranked fantasy football athlete that we have for the Packers. He's ranked 19th overall, and this is according to Fantasy Pros, which you guys, if you haven't seen Fantasy Pros, that's the website you want to go to. It breaks it down very, very well. They have him ranked 19th overall. He's stuck in between guys like Drake London and Bucky Irvin. He has a 4 out of 5 strength of schedule rank, which means that this is a great schedule for Josh Jacobs if you want to draft somebody like that. And I think the Packers are going to direct their offense to absolutely run through Josh Jacobs. I just feel like that's what's going to happen. He's drafted as the 8th overall running back, which I think is even a little bit shorten him a little bit of his due credit there. He's drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round, depending on if you have an 8 or a 12-man team. Jordan Love is interesting because he's in the tier 3 of quarterbacks. He's ranked number 15 of the quarterbacks. He's in between Fields and Dak Prescott, which, again, with fantasy football, take it with a grain of salt. That doesn't mean that he's that Dak Prescott and that specifically Justin Fields are the type of quarterback. That just means that Justin Fields runs a lot and he's going to get you more fantasy points than the typical, quarterback would. He's being drafted 102nd overall. That's somewhere between rounds 7 and 10. But the problem is with him is, according to the experts, they give him a 2 out of 5 ranking for strength of schedule, meaning they think he's going to have a real rough go at it this year. That's going to coincide with the wide receivers, which is why they absolutely fell down a well. What's interesting, besides Jacobs and Jordan, the next ranked highest offensive player we have is Jayden Reed. He's 97th overall, but he's wide receiver 45, which is kind of crazy. Our number one quote unquote wide receiver is wide receiver 45. He's sandwiched in between Juwan Jennings and Caleb Williams, which is kind of interesting when you look at that as far as what they expect from their production. He also has a 2 of 5 strength of schedule ranking. What's really crazy though to me is that I told you Jordan Love was at 102 ranked overall. Guess who's number 103? Tucker Kraft, baby.
Oh, let's go.
Tuck Norris is coming in at 103. He is the overall 11th tight end, which, again, I don't think they're giving him enough love. He's sandwiched in between Jordan Love and Ricky Pearsall. He's a 2 out of 5 strength of schedule, which, again, means that they don't expect him, to have a great advantage or whatever, but I still think that's amazing. Golden, Mr. Matthew Golden is 130th overall. He's wide receiver 53. Granted, that's a tier 8. He's again scheduled the 2 out of 5 as far as strength of schedule. Dobbs is 150th overall. So this is where I was going to kind of make my point. If you want to have your Packers guys kind of pepper through your team, it's a great year to do it, because Romeo Dobbs, who I would argue is still our number one. I know we did that exercise the other day as far as what his stats come out to. I just feel like for whatever reason that the ball is going to go through Romeo in the first part of this season, just until maybe Savion or Golden or even, Reed kind of get their feet wet. And then Marshawn Lloyd was 165th overall, running back 54. And that kind of surprised me because we obviously haven't seen a lot from him, but I really do think that they're going to try to get him involved. And as much as I love our other running backs, it's a tough backfield to try to understand, other than Josh Jacobs, obviously, who's going to get the ball, because I could see them going through Chris Brooks. They obviously love, who else am I thinking of, Clay? Running back 3.
Running back wise, yeah, you got Emmanuel Wilson, right?
Emmanuel Wilson, thank you. So it's to me, it'd be tough for him to crack through the depth chart like that. But you watch the USC clips of Lloyd, and it makes you understand as to why people are projecting him in a fantasy league, because they're like, if this guy actually gets these touches, and if he spells Jacobs in a way, it's a fun group to look at. And as always, like I said, most years the Packers wide receivers, other than Devontae Adams, have just been falling by the wayside. So what I would suggest for you is, if you are in a fantasy league, save your last 3 picks, get yourself either Dontavian Wicks, get yourself Luke Musgrave, and then get yourself maybe like a Savion or a Michael. I mean, Golden's, like I said, going pretty high just because he's the number 1 draft pick, but nobody's drafting Savion. Nobody is. So that's
really interesting there, because, they may be able to pop him into the backfield and get some really, really easy fantasy points there. Now, obviously, Matt LaFleur and Adam Stenavich are not thinking about that at all. But it just feels like if you want to get Savion on the field, sooner rather than later, you could probably throw him into the backfield in that pony package and let him kind of eat up some carries that way, take a little bit of the load off of some of the running backs, and also create a little bit of a mismatch if you want to start him in the pony package and then cheat motion him out wide. So very interesting. And what you said about Romeo Dobbs, Jacob, it depends on what you mean by number 1 receiver. There's no doubt about it that if he hadn't got hurt last year, he would have led the team in targets. There's no 2 ways about it. That tells me that Matt LaFleur sees him at least as an equal number 1 to everyone else on the team. So if that's your definition of, hey, look, he's the number 1 receiver, meaning he's going to get the majority of the share of the targets, that was proven last year. There's no doubt about it. And when I look at a number 1 receiver, I think of who is the best receiver on the team, right? When someone says, is he a true number 1 receiver? That's when I go, okay, there's only a handful of true number 1 receivers in the league where coverages actually roll to those guys and they're dictating what the defense does, type thing. So it just depends on how people look at that term, number 1 receiver, if that makes sense. So that's good stuff though, man. I'm eager to see what Jordan does healthy now, because, would you say he was 15th amongst quarterbacks? Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
I think that's a little low. I really do. I think once you get up to the 12 range, it's like, okay, now you're getting into where I feel like he truly is. 15, I think, is on the low side, and I think he can be as high as 6 or 7. Yeah,
to be fair, that's because I think they, like most projections and ratings, they go off of what have you done for me lately. Jordan Love, obviously with the injuries, he did not run last year, and that's a big deal in fantasy football to have a quarterback that can get you a few more extra yards running. So
a little extra value there this year than with him being healthy, right?
Yep,
100%. Inside information there. So good stuff, man. So there's just a little snippet of fantasy football preview. Appreciate you looking all that stuff up, Jake. And again, it kind of shows you where the fantasy community is looking at the Packers and these specific players. And then also when you go to the Vegas lines, you can kind of look and see, all right, what does Vegas think? And I think both of those pieces of information is very valuable. Really, really good.
Yeah, it is really crazy because Bo